Hello, my name is Stacy Moore, and today I will be talking to you about the Inter-Service Intelligence Agency in Pakistan. The ISI is responsible for both internal and external intelligence gathering activities in the country of Pakistan. However, the agency has become a threat to the very existence of the government of Pakistan and has become a force for instability in the region as well, as it supports various terrorist groups that operate in the border regions of India and also in Afghanistan. The ISI has been accused of training terrorists and providing material support that impact, as I said before, internal security, regional security, and also training terrorists that have gone around the world, including many of the leaders of Al-Qaeda. Primarily, though, Pakistan's problems lie in that the ISI has been used to further the geopolitical aims of the Pakistani government. Therefore, they supported groups such as Lashkar-e-Taiba, which conducts attacks in the Kashmir region at the border of Pakistan and India, as a form of proxy war to help Pakistan combat India's influence in the region. Additionally, the ISI supported the Taliban in Afghanistan with the CIA's help, of course, to help push the Soviets out of that country. But that also provided the Pakistani government with a stable northern ally so that they did not have to worry about their northern border. They could then focus more closely on India. However, in recent times, now that the Taliban has fallen, the organizations that the ISI once supported have developed their own means of financial and material support. Therefore, they no longer need the ISI's money to conduct operations, and the ISI has lost a lot of control over these organizations. The consequences of this action is that there's been an increase in attacks by these terrorist organizations on government targets inside of Pakistan, as well as increasingly violent attacks, such as the large-scale attacks that occurred in Mumbai. Therefore, this causes huge amounts of problems with Pakistan and its neighbors, as well as the NATO forces that are currently operating in the region. Additionally, the close contact between the ISI and these extremist organizations has led to a rise in extremism within the ISI itself, which does pose an additional threat to the Pakistani government, as these are very powerful people within the government. Of course, with the U.S. operating so closely in that region in its attempts to stabilize Afghanistan, the U.S. does have significant policy written about how to deal with Pakistan. Of course, as I mentioned before, the CIA did help to fund the insurgency inside of Afghanistan when the Soviets were occupying that country. And they did so primarily by funneling funds and supplies through the ISI to the Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan. That close contact between the ISI and the CIA, however, was not transparent, and the ISI very often filtered some of the money and arms that they received from the CIA to other insurgent groups to further the ISI's own goals. This led then to a growth of extremist groups that had nothing to do with fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, and helped lead to the rise of the global jihad movement. At the current time, the United States is looking to partner with Pakistan and uses the ISI as a source of intelligence in the region. The ISI possesses human assets that the United States just could not put into play in the region at all. However, there's not a lot of two-way sharing of information. The U.S. leadership has a deep mistrust of Pakistan's government and of their intelligence services. In fact, Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has criticized the ISI for sending attackers to Kabul. And Leon Panetta, who was then the director of the CIA, refused to share details of the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound because he feared that the operation would be compromised. It's an interesting situation considering that the United States has pumped $20 billion worth of military aid into the country, and does also conduct a drone program within Pakistani sovereign territory. So the assumption would be that the two groups would be much more closely aligned than they are. However, there is a large anti-American sentiment within the populace and amongst many in the government, at least through in public forums, And this has consequences on the relationship between the United States and Pakistan. It makes it extraordinarily difficult for Pakistani leaders to align themselves with the West because of the sentiment that it will invoke within their own population, and they're hoping, of course, to be reelected. The United States is not the only one that has difficulties with the Pakistani ISI, of course. The Chinese, Russians, and Iranian government also have economic and social interests in the area. Those nations are primarily impacted by the criminal networks that the terrorist groups have set up in the region. India and Afghanistan seem to bear the unique brunt of most of the spectacular terrorist-style attacks, though. And so they have particular interest in making sure that the ISI is reformed in such a way as to make the entire region more safe and stable. In Afghanistan in particular, the ISI has had such a long and interconnected relationship with the Taliban that is currently trying to overthrow the Afghan regime that they often accuse the ISI of helping to plan and execute attacks within the country. However, their official written policies, and in many of his public speeches as well, President Karzai continues to emphasize the brotherly relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan, stating that the two countries share common interests, cultures, languages, and goals, and should therefore be able to coordinate much more closely in many of these situations. Particularly in counterterrorism and crime prevention, they do often have bilateral ministerial level meetings to help work these things out. However, in practice, it would seem that Pakistan and Afghanistan continue to have friction, much of which is caused by Afghanistan's continually growing closer ties to India as India begins to create more economic development in Afghanistan and wishes to exert its own influence in the region. India and Pakistan have long been rivals in the region. They're both nuclear armed and have fought 3 wars over the border region of Kashmir. They also have an official policy of partnership, though, with official information sharing agreements between their intelligence agencies, and they do have close diplomatic ties, with their diplomats making frequent trips to one another's capitals. However, the tension over the support of terrorist organizations is particularly high in India because of the number of attacks that there have been and the spectacular nature of the attacks. These two nations are getting closer economically, and hopefully that will drive them to coordinate and cooperate on other aspects of the relationship. However, the foreign minister of India has said that there will be no progress in other realms of their relationship until the perpetrators of the Mumbai attack are brought to justice. So this is a very complex threat situation. There are solutions, though. Corruption, lack of transparency, and lack of oversight are really the primary issues facing the ISI right now. And Nawaz Ganguly and Kapoor note that corruption is simply rampant in the Pakistani government, and that it is possible that the large amounts of money that the U.S. government is currently pumping into their economy and the money that was sent by the CIA during the Soviet occupation may have contributed to that corruption. Ashley Tellis then suggests that changing the aid relationship between the United States and Pakistan may be the solution to the problem. By modifying these aid arrangements and placing stronger conditions on them receiving these dollars, the Pakistanis would then be held accountable for their actions, particularly by saying that we would cease all aid should another spectacular 9/11 style attack occur outside of Pakistan, but having been found to have originated there. She feels that it would rein in the ISI's influence on terrorist groups. Mark Roberts, however, has a completely opposite opinion. He feels as if all military aid should be stopped immediately to keep it from falling into the hands of extremists, and that economic and diplomatic incentives should be used instead to help eliminate the causes of extremism in the first place. Another way to solve this problem is to shift the structure of the ISI and the Pakistani government in general. Hassan Abbas states that the structure of the ISI could be changed so that there is more oversight of individual operations, and that in changes in the Pakistani rule of law by bringing terrorist subjects actually to a court of law would help to stop corruption. Sujal Nawaz has a similar idea in that he feels that there should be more legislative oversight of the ISI. by creating oversight committees inside of the Pakistani parliament, he feels that the ISI would become more accountable to elected leaders. And that would lead to the cutting of ties with terrorist organizations. Indeed, Moeed Yusuf also feels that now is the ideal time for Pakistan to cut ties with terrorist organizations. It currently poses a grave threat to the government's very existence, and it no longer serves the Pakistanis' geopolitical goals in the region. There is no longer an incentive for them to use terrorist tactics against their neighbors. It's probably one of the better ways for them, or better reasons for them, to simply cut all ties, which would then allow them to create new reforms. And I agree that it is an opportune moment in time for Pakistan to implement these new reforms. They have recently elected a new prime minister and many new parliamentary leaders, and this allows them that window of time to start making changes in their government. The first thing that would have to happen is for them to absolutely cut ties with all terrorist organizations. This would be a show of good faith to the nations of the world that Pakistan is ready to make strong changes. They would begin to provide information to other intelligence organizations and insist in the arrest or detention of terrorist subjects. And as I said, this would redefine the relationships between them and other intelligence agencies so that more free flow of information could happen between all of these groups. It would also help to redefine the aid relationships. Instead of pursuing simply financial aid, Pakistan should pursue training and materiel support. This would allow the culture of the ISI to change as they worked with other agencies across the world. This training and cultural shift would allow the Pakistanis to appreciate the role of legislative oversight in the process. And that could drive a change in their parliament to then create oversight committees and allow more executive oversight and an accountability to the public for what the ISI has, what activities the ISI is undertaking. There is no very simple solution to this problem. It's an extraordinarily complex threat environment. But cutting ties with terrorists, redefining relationships with the rest of the world, and increasing oversight will allow the ISI to become the professional agency that Pakistan needs to provide it the in-depth analysis it will need to navigate the difficult terrain that it finds itself in. Thank you.